So I, like many of you, have been starved for Victoria 3 content, pending the release of the game. And I've been looking forward to, in particular, a Tunis play that I'm going to be trying to attempt. And luckily, someone recently did an AAR of Iraq. I'm not sure how they got Iraq. It didn't seem like a startable nation. It seemed like it was one that has to be released from the Ottomans. So we are going to be reacting to / analyzing the Iraq AAR in the context of eventually wanting to do a Tunis run ourselves, and how do we play as a subject of the Ottoman Empire, such that we can try and extract as much wealth from them as possible, or be able to fight them or handle the situation. Although Tunis, specifically, I think it's going to be really dependent on dealing with France. So let's jump into taking a look at this AAR, and hopefully we'll get some insights from that and some thoughts. Oop. Alright. So, looks like we've been ejected from the larger market, and now we need to make ends meet. So somehow he is now out of the Ottomans market, so I'm guessing this AAR started as a releasing Iraq from the Ottoman Empire, or is just some, modded or sort of experimental build. He has shortages in artillery, fabric, and clippers. That's bad for the military, and kind of lets us know that these industries are not in Iraq. I'm guessing Iraq is mainly agrarian, and so these goods are expensive. Interesting resource potentials. Can grow cotton and no wood or iron. This is another concern I have for Tunis. I think that trying to get trade with Russia is a good look, but if we take a look at Iraq on the map, they have to trade out of this port here, because they are not land adjacent to the Ottomans, and so that will be difficult to try and get wood from them. Two much stronger neighbors who we need to play nice with. Yeah, I'm guessing that's Persia and the Ottomans, although Egypt's going to be stronger than you too, my guy. I think you're also adjacent. Oh, no, wait, you're not adjacent to Egypt. Okay, fair enough. And then, looks like they can build a lot of wheat farms. Let's see. Stopped using cannon artillery in our barracks because it's expensive and we have no goods to produce, and no good source of cannon. Second, I've begun selling tobacco to our Turkish friends as we're producing greatly more than we can consume. So this makes sense. Also, when you have a trade route to a nation, it improves your diplomatic relations, so this seems good. And then it looks like, I assume they are importing these clippers. We're also going to need to build some cotton plantations to address the current shortage. I think building cotton plantations early on will be really strong. I think very early on, you want to build construction industries, timber, cotton, and fabric, and this kind of handles everything, because the construction industry's inputs early on, when you are not one of these big omega starting nations, is going to be wood and fabric, and the cotton makes... I'm not sure if the cotton makes the fabric, but it's definitely going to be an ingredient for the fabric. And so this helps for the construction, and it also helps boost the standard of living, which is important for a variety of reasons. And so early on, if you just focus on these few industries, it can kind of help jumpstart your economy, get people off of subsistence farms, increase standard of living, rather than immediately jumping into the industrialization. Looks like he's building cotton plantations, and... wood consumption. Let's take a look. Is this global wood consumption? It's slightly more expensive than normal. I'm guessing this is all the places that it can be chopped. Not much of it in Iraq for this playthrough. I know that Russia has a good source of it, and then Brazil's also going to be a good source. Ottoman wants a defensive pact. That seems like a good idea. Yeah, extremely good idea. With a single cotton plantation finished, fabric and therefore clothes is now affordable. So I'm guessing the cotton plantation makes fabric. I didn't see the thing of the cotton plantation itself. I don't know what it's called. The industry, the building, but the textile mill. So again, standard of living. And this seems to be what all of the people who are doing, all the devs are doing. This seems to be their strategy. They go for a couple construction centers, and then they go for cotton, timber, or food. And these are the three. Notice he talks about destroying the budget. I think if you're really small, you maybe only want to build one construction center, and then medium, two, and then once you're bigger, you get to build more. Do you have wood for those construction centers? Nope. and he's running into cost issues from a wood shortage. Not only is it expensive, he's having a shortage, and notably, again, you have the fabric being one of the inputs. So, really trying to kickstart things. It's definitely the fabric, the wood, and the construction centers, I think, are definitely the way to go. And he gets into a trade agreement with the Ottomans. This is something I was thinking about for, like, trying to do the Tunis run, is if... I think you want to... So I think there's, like, you have a couple options, which is, one, you try and get the base goods, like the early goods, the fabric, the food, and the wood yourself. And the second is you try and import it and then get trade agreements, and you try and push the price of those goods down. And the reason being is if you are trying to disempower the landowners, I believe the landowners own the cotton manufactories, the wood, the logging industries, and the farms. And so if you're trying to, I know they own the plantations, and so if you're trying to weaken the landowners, you don't want to be building up a bunch of these industries. And so it creates this weird sort of tension. They haven't really discussed it in the AARs that I've seen, where they're concerned about this, and maybe for the first, like, 10 construction buildings, you just don't care. You're just trying to get off the ground. But this is something I've definitely been thinking about for the Tunis run, is trying to largely import our wood and get a trade agreement with the Russians. Obviously, you can't have a trade agreement with the Russians if you are playing as Iraq, because you cannot trade with them because you do not have a land border, and the going around Africa is probably makes it too expensive. And clippers are expensive anyways. This also means that when we're importing something, Ottomans should be our preferred trade partner. Yeah, I think this is going to be the large... You are going to generally want to go for trade agreements with someone you want to have a good diplomacy with, or someone you're importing a lot from. And that's, for the Tunis run, that's probably going to be trying to get that with both France and Russia, if possible. Austria would also be good. I think those are the three main allies. But for Iraq, which is what this guy's playing, Ottomans and Persians seems good. And prices are stabilizing on the construction centers. And I think that this is probably, like, a good way to start out. I've already mentioned that. Look, internal politics. Landowners have all the power. This is not surprising with Iraq. And man, do they have a lot of power. And the rural folk are next. Interesting to see armed forces and the devout so weak. I guess we'll move on to the next page. Let's see. Major issue going to run into, most of the population is in some way discriminate. We're Shiite Muslims, but 60% of the country is Sunni, and we have a state religion. So this is an interesting thing with the Ottomans, I was thinking, is there's so many persecuted groups that being a part of their market, so when you're a part of someone's market, you get migration all across the market, and there's so many persecuted groups within the Ottomans empire, and also Iraq, which starts out as part of the Ottomans, that staying in or getting in their market and then trying to pass liberal reforms and then attract a bunch of migration actually seems like a pretty reasonable look. If we're looking at just the Iraq region, 60% of the country is discriminated against religiously, so if you could pass a reform to, let people have freedom of religion, you should be able to get good migration pull. And so, and then the second thing is, just so for all the Ottomans as well, like, I haven't seen the Turkish breakdown of this, culture and religion and this sort of stuff, but they probably have a lot of discrimination and bifurcated groups and, like, this sort of stuff as well. So, trying to sap out a lot of their pops is probably going to be a big part of the strategy for the Tunis run, and not getting independence early, but rather staying inside their market for a little while. No political will to change discrimination laws. So this is the trouble, I think, going to be for Tunis, but Tunis was actually the first North African country to abolish, or the first African country to abolish slavery, so we'll see. We need to pass some police and external security laws to keep on top of this. Turks who are strong... Yeah, the Turks are still powerful. Very high chance of passing either local police force or dedicated police force. I think that local police force you don't want to pass because it empowers the landowners, and dedicated police force would be better. Let's see what he says. I like dedicated better since local empowers landowners even further. Yep. It doesn't reduce the number of radicals we generate. It does reduce penalties for high turmoil more, but I think prevention is better than the cure. And I think in general, most people's runs, they're going to be looking to liberalize. And so this, just keeping track of everything that empowers the landowners is going to be important because landowners oppose a lot of the liberal reforms. And so I think you want to get them out of power as quickly as possible, which is one of the reasons why, like, building the cotton plantations immediately might not be good because it's giving them more money, you know. But at the same time, I think so what you can do is you can make import licenses. You can put import licenses on stuff if you have control of the market. And if you put import licenses on stuff, you don't pay the people who are exporting don't pay the import tariff. And so you just put import licenses on all of the goods that are produced by buildings that are owned by the landowners. And this way, and you also import them, this way you can reduce their profits and weaken them as an IG. Although you are reducing the profits of some of your own domestic people, so maybe this is like not going to be the most productive way of going about it. But I think it's interesting to think about and perhaps do. Um, so no tariffs. He's shipping almost all of his tobacco out. For the Tunis run, what I'm thinking is to try and... So if you build an industry really tall, for every one you build, you get a 1% like throughput bonus up to 21%. So I think something that interesting you can try and do is try and specialize really early. And for the Tunis round, I'm going to try and do that with arms. And arms is an interesting one because if you specialize in it really early and you export to people you might have to go to war with, what you do is if you go to war with them and then you cut off the hose, you will just skyrocket the price of the good and cause shortages. Which is, I think, an interesting approach to try and leverage and keep leveraged this advantage, especially if you're a small country. But I also don't know if you can get enough out. Sunni aristocrats. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. The price of this is relatively high. They're exporting a ton of it. And then it's empowering the aristocrats. So what they could do is, well, they can't import it and they can't consume it, so you have to export it, and when you're exporting, the price is going to go up. But when you're exporting, oh, well, one thing is, there's no tariffs, because they're being exported to the Turks, right? Who they have a trade agreement with. So perhaps trying to not export to the Turks and export to someone else, it would be a way to push the price down, because that's the way they're eating the tariffs. Sulfur mine, yay. I don't know what sulfur goes into all. Ottomans are the aggressor, and they attacked Egypt. I'm thinking that this is another reason why building in Tunis arms manufactories early and then exporting to the Ottomans is a good idea, because they will go to war with Egypt, and then you make hand over fist while they have the extremely high demand. Guys pass police force. Ottomans are having a bad time. Struggle bus for the Ottomans. Notably, if you're playing as their subject in Tunis, I don't think you care if like they get rolled. You just want to have access to their market. And Ottomans turn it back around. I think he released Iraq. I think Iraq starts as part of the Ottoman Empire, but and that's why he's not in their market. Or he somehow got out on a, like not playing on the AAR, and this is like a later run. Do we have the year? No, he built construction. I think it was just starting out. I think he released. Romanticism, agrarianism is good. And that's exactly what he says. He's trying to move away from traditionalism, so he's trying to get agrarianism. And so this is like why all the like liberal reforms and all the good reforms seem to be opposed by the landowners. And so this is a struggle bus to enact for him. And this is the end of this sheet. So there's only one more sheet of the AAR, tragic, and it's short. We'd have an easier time if we kicked the landowners out of government, but it would annoy them a bit. Yeah. Tiger's flooded. This is a cool little event. I guess not so cool for him. Massive flood relief and 80% devastation. Big oof. And so this is also, when you reduce tariffs, you can sell more. So if you are trying to make, if there's an industry, a local industry that you don't use for inputs, so let's say he's not using sulfur as an input for anything, he's just purely exporting it. Something you can do is, if you notice, he clicked the button to the right of the sulfur, on the right hand side of the sulfur. This means he's not charging anything for tariffs, which will drive the price of the good up. And so instead of the money going to the tariff, it's instead going to the pops, and this empowers the pops. I think, let's take a look. Can we see on the sulfur farm who owns it? I think that means the shopkeepers, the balanced scales. I'm not sure exactly. If it is the shopkeepers, I believe the shopkeepers are not the landowners. So empowering them and trying to make them wealthier is like a reasonable look. And you produce fewer tariffs, so you take in less money, but your pops take in more money. And so making this trade-off of subsidizing your pops through various means is a bit interesting. You also make the Brits slightly dependent on you for sulfur. Obviously, this is just like a pittance of their consumption, and so it's like not a big deal. But if you built up a ton of sulfur, you could make them highly dependent and allow you to, economically interfere. With arms, I think, is the biggest or best opportunity to economically interfere with people or clippers, because when they go to war, then you can cut off the nozzle, and when you go to war, you double, or when you muster, it looks like you double your need for the thing, and so they will double demand, and then if you also just cut their supply in half at the same time, they'll just run into huge shortages. He's researching intensive agriculture, and so he can make chemical plants. Okay, and when he clicks the chemical plant button, he will probably also change or when he starts making chemical plants that utilize the sulfur, he will probably reimpose the tariff. That way, it pushes down the price of sulfur, which makes his chemical engineering plants more profitable. Would be my guess. How is your pop growth, El Daniel? Not moving. Sad for El Daniel. Looking at the population chart, though, I'm guessing this is the releasing of Iraq from Turkey. And then he ends the session, which is a bit unfortunate. I was starting to get into it quite a bit. It's interesting that he's also so not that much time passed. So if we scroll to the bottom, it looks like 7 years passed, and he didn't get attacked, and he was relatively safe. And he was just kind of doing his own thing, trying to eke out a living. I don't think he had too many construction industries, so he couldn't build that much. If we look at the first thing, he built a couple construction industries, then he built some cotton plantations, and then some sulfur mines at some point. And so it's going to be interesting how these early or small places kind of get off the ground. I think that what you're building is going to be somewhat committal, and so it's, do you try and kickstart your economy by focusing on some of the early inputs, or do you try and specialize and do something with trade early on? And it's probably safer to focus on the early inputs of food, timber, and fabric, because when you can create a construction industry, it increases the demand for timber and fabric, so the price of these go up, which makes it so that logging camps and fabric production, which I'm not sure if I think it's the cotton plantation just produces fabric, but it makes it so that the price goes up, which makes these more profitable. So when you build those, it helps enrich your pops, which increases the standard of living. As the standard of living goes up, they need to buy more food, and so that's why grain is also a part of this starting steps. You produce more grain, the grain is more profitable because they are making more money, and it's just kind of this circular, everyone's passing around the money and getting rich thing. If he was still part of the Ottoman's market, I think that what he could do is a bit more interesting, because then he can rely on the Ottomans to produce the fabric and the timber, and he can go into industrial methods right away, and that way he wouldn't have to build the cotton plantations, which help empower the landowners, and so he could pass liberal reforms easier, and he could also try and specialize and get the throughput bonus, up to 21% if he just produces only one type of manufacture. Whether it's I think the two good ones are tools, because tools is used for all the other later stuff, and if you're part of a larger market. if you're not part of the larger market, you're going to have to like try and balance your internal thing. But if you're part of the Ottoman's larger market, you can produce tools early on because those are used for later industrial efforts, which makes transition easier. And also, the Ottomans are going to get slapped when you leave them, if when you leave their market. And then you could also produce arms, which you try and export to people you're afraid of. I think this is the strategy, because it's unlike Victoria 2. Not that I'm an expert in Victoria 2. You don't stockpile stuff. And so you have to respond. You can only stockpile gold reserves. And so exporting weapons to your enemies seems like a really good idea, because just as soon as you have to fight them, you just turn off the export. When they're mustering the troops, the maintenance, it requires double the equipment, and then you just suddenly shoot down their amount of their equipment. They'll have to pay like out the ass. They'll have shortages, and this seems like a decent approach if you're already in a market. And so playing these saboteurs from within, if you are playing a country that's already that's a subject of a larger market, or a subject of another nation, like whether it's the UK or Ottomans in this case we're talking about mainly, I think I think you might want to focus on industrial efforts more. The biggest concern I have is you just don't have enough qualifications to transition to the next tier production methods. Like, so if you have a bunch of arms manufacturers, moving to the next tier up might just require too many qualifications for a lot of these, like Tripoli and Iraq and Tunis, and that's like kind of my concern. But anyways, this AAR was interesting. I enjoyed reading through it. It was a bit short. Would have been interesting to see if he turns a corner. He's obviously having problems with the landowners, and this is I don't know to what degree, building these first few plantations and also the tobacco stuff, which he already had, really pumps up the landowners, or if it's really not that big a problem in terms of getting money in their hands. I think trying to import. See, the problem is when you try and import the goods that they're producing to try and make them poor, you also make the rest of your pops poorer, but you get cheaper inputs. Is the biggest thing. So, for example, if you're importing wood, everything that is produced from wood becomes cheaper to make. So, actually, a better one might be you're doing canning or something, or you're doing grocery goods, or let's say you're making furniture. Furniture takes wood, and so if you import the wood, because I think the wood is an industry that is landowner based at the start. If you import the wood, you depress and you eliminate the import tariffs on it. You depress the price of wood. Okay, this makes all your pops working in logging camps sad. Because they're going to get paid less, and it makes the landowners sad who own the logging camps. I think they own the logging camps. Not 100% sure on this one. At least at the tier 1. I think when you get to sawmills, it's now industrialists. But it depresses the price. You then use that depressed price to manufacture furniture, which makes the furniture industries way more profitable. And so you're sort of triaging your early inputs rather than bolstering them at the start of the game. And this might be a good approach, again, if you're inside of the market of a larger company or country, because they will, well, actually, I think they decide the import-export tariffs, but just not expanding the industry yourself and instead going right from manufacturing might be a way to try and liberalize faster, and also be able to, when you liberalize faster and pass liberal reforms, you suck the migration from various parts of the country. And so this might be a really good strategy. Also, it might not be, because you're kind of kicking yourself if you get kicked out of the market, because you don't have any production of the fabric or the timber or any of this, so you're going to have a rough time if you somehow get ejected from the market. But if you don't, this seems like a strong strategy. Anyways, hope that was interesting. This AAR was interesting. Again, back at it with the landowners having a lot of power. This seems to be a very common theme amongst all the AARs. And so just trying to disempower the landowners from an early start, even if it costs a little bit, seems like a good look. But again, it depends on the numbers and the balance, and I don't know because I'm still waiting for the release, as you all are. So hopefully this was a bit of a tide me over of sorts, and gives something to think about. In terms of comments, if anyone has any suggestions on how to make playing as Tunis easier, because that's going to be the first country I play as, feel free to put them in the comments. Really, please put them in the comments. I've been thinking about this quite a while. I think that I think the best strategy is probably keep restarting until France is not belligerent towards you. And again, what I'm going to try and do is probably try and specialize in both tools and weapons and within the Ottomans market, and import some of the base goods to try and disempower the landowners. I've talked about this a little bit. That's my current plan. If anyone has any other suggestions, feel free to do that. Also, feel free to do the YouTube algorithm stuff, like, comment, subscribe. And then last but not least, if you have not gotten up in the last 2 hours, maybe take a 5-minute walk. Just walk to the end of the block and back. Step outside. It's good for your health. This sort of stuff. I could say research, but no. All right. Have a good day.